Imagine waking up one morning and finding out your legal, state-issued ID is suddenly worthless. Well, that's pretty much what happened in Kansas, in what can only be called a major policy shock. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into how it all went down, who was behind it, and what the real hidden costs are for an entire community.
Just think about getting a letter with this jarring message. Your documents were invalid immediately. No warning, no time to figure things out. A legal ID, something you rely on for everything, just gone. I mean, a move like that raises a huge question, right?
How is something like this even possible? That's the core mystery we're unpacking today. First, we've got to follow the paper trail and see how the law itself was made. Then, we're going to look at a fascinating model that actually tries to calculate the true cost of a decision like this, not just for one person, but for the whole state.
Now, this didn't happen with one single law. It was more like a two-step legal ratchet. A really deliberate legislative process where one law basically set a trap, and a second one came along to spring it. Let's break down how that mechanism actually worked.
Okay, so here's how it played out. Step 1 happened back in 2023 with a bill called SB180. This laid the foundation by creating a new statewide legal definition of sex as biological sex at birth. Then you get to Step 2, SB244. This was the enforcement arm. It took that new definition and used it to retroactively cancel any IDs or birth certificates that didn't match it. And the kicker? It was all effective immediately.
So after SB 180 passed in 2023, things got messy. For a couple of years, there were these legal fights between the Attorney General and other state agencies over what this new definition even meant in practice. But it all came to a head in February 2026. That's when the legislature overrode a veto to pass SB 244, and boom, what was just a definition on paper suddenly became a massive, enforceable action.
All right, so who were the key players here? Who was pushing for this and who was trying to stop it? When you dig into the legislative record, you can really see the main arguments and the different groups that lined up on each side of this fight.
So let's break down the arguments. The proponents really focused on three main points. They said this was about creating clarity and consistency in state law. They also talked about protecting privacy and safety in sex-separated spaces. And finally, they argued they were just fulfilling the original intent of that first law from 2023. Now, on the other side, opponents had a completely different view. They argued the bills would write discrimination into law, effectively erase the legal recognition of transgender Kansans, and trigger widespread, total chaos for government agencies.
And this wasn't just a battle between politicians, you know? All sorts of national and local organizations got involved. On the side supporting the bills, you had groups like the Alliance Defending Freedom and the Kansas Sheriff's Association testifying in favor. And leading the charge against them, you had a coalition that included the ACLU of Kansas, Equality Kansas, and other major civil rights groups.
Okay, let's move past the politics and talk about the actual, tangible impact. This is where it gets really interesting. The source material lays out a fiscal model that projects the costs of this new law over 20 years for a hypothetical rural Kansas county. We're about to get into the numbers.
Under what the model calls a high-conflict scenario, which means frequent lawsuits and people actually leaving the community, the projected 20-year cost is a staggering $5.8 million. I mean, where does a number that huge even come from?
Well, the model doesn't just predict one outcome, it actually projects three, and it all comes down to the level of community conflict. In a low-conflict scenario, where things are handled smoothly, the cost is manageable at about $312,000. But start adding in some litigation and people quitting their jobs, and you get the moderate scenario, which hits nearly $1.6 million. The crucial takeaway here is that the financial fallout isn't a fixed number. It's directly shaped by how the community responds to the law.
And when you see it laid out visually like this, the difference is stark. The financial curve gets exponentially steeper as community conflict goes up. We're not talking about a small gap between the best and worst case scenarios. We're looking at a massive financial cliff.
So what's actually driving these multi-million-dollar figures? Well, this might be the model's most surprising finding. The primary costs aren't the direct legal penalties like fines or jail time. Nope, not at all. They're the indirect, cascading effects. Incredible strain on the mental health system, a shrinking workforce that makes it hard to hire, tons of lawsuits that cause insurance rates to spike, and just overall instability in the healthcare sector.
Now, this might all seem like a local Kansas story, but a major upcoming event is about to give this policy a really surprising global dimension, putting the state and its laws directly on the world stage.
That's right. In 2026, the FIFA World Cup is coming to Kansas City.
We're talking hundreds of thousands of international visitors and global media all descending on the region. And when that happens, local policies like this one are suddenly going to be under a very bright, very international spotlight, affecting everything from tourism to the region's entire brand.
And that brings us to our final critical question. This model we looked at tries to calculate the tangible costs in dollars and cents, but it forces us to consider something much bigger. Regardless of any law's intent, what is the full price of its ripple effect on a community, its economy, and ultimately its reputation on the world stage?
Feel the rhythm, move your feet. I love you, radio. It's all about you. Feel the love, feel the